through the cultural aspect of white imperialism is that posed by the use of historical knowledge as a weapon in our struggle. We are virtually forced into this vidious position of proving our humanity by citing historical antecedents, and yet the evidence is too often submitted to the white racist for sanctions. The white man has already implemented numerous historical myths in the minds of black peoples, and those have to be uprooted, since they can act as a drag on revolutionary action in the present epoch. Under these circumstances, it is necessary to direct our historical activities in the light of two basic principles. Firstly, the effort must be directed solely towards freeing and mobilizing black minds. There must be no performances to impress whites, for those whites who find themselves beside us in the firing line will be there for reasons far more profound than their exposure to African history. Secondly, the acquired knowledge of African history must be seen as a directly relevant, but secondary to the concrete tactics and strategies which are necessary for our liberation. There must be no false distinctions between reflection and action, because the conquest of power is our immediate goal, and the African population at home and abroad is already in combat, one on a number of fronts. If there is to be any proving of any humanity, it must be by revolutionary means. The Cuban Revolution has already demonstrated in this hemisphere the role of achievement of black people as participants in a people's war against imperialism. They were a despised minority in the period of U.S. hegemony, but the dignity which they have achieved in the process of Cuban Revolution is itself eliminating the initial necessity to draw distinctions along the lines of race and color. Interests in the African Revolution, in African plastic arts and drama, and in the history of Africans in the New World is cultivated in Cuba today at a level that is far above that of neo-colonialist Jamaica, which is 90% black. In Jamaica, a recent proposal to teach African history and an African language in the schools was turned down by the black Prime Minister. The conclusion is clear. Jamaican freedom fighters will read some African history in the course of preparing for an engaging in hostilities, but the struggle will not wait until the re-education of the mass of the black people reaches an advanced stage. In response to the demand for more black culture and history, the national bourgeoisie of the USA has adopted a technique different from that of their neo-colonialist puppets in the West Indies. Having that security which comes from the possession of capital, they feel confident in making certain concessions to black culture in their educational institutions and media of public communication. As always, they concede the lesser demand to maintain a total structure of white capitalist domination, hoping to siphon off young black people into a preoccupation with African history and culture divorced from the raw reality of the American system as it operates on both the domestic and international front. The gambit must not work. That gambit must not work. Imagine a juicy contradiction. Rockefeller finances chair on African history from the profits of exploiting South African black people and upholding apartheid. Black revolutionary studies African culture alongside of researchers into germ warfare against the Vietnamese people. We black people in the Americas have missed the opportunity when a more leisurely appraisal of our past might have been possible. It is nearly half a century since Garvey remarked that, quote, the white world has always tried to rob and discredit us of our history, end quote. And in that period, far too few black people made the effort to enrich themselves and brothers by acquiring a knowledge of African history. In 1929, Norman E. Cameron, a black man from Guyana, wrote the first volume of The Evolution of the Black Person. They said the N-word that means black, in which he sought to revive the pride and confidence of Africans in the New World by pointing out the achievements of African states in the period prior to the European advent. And the work of Richard Moore has been similar in content and purpose. Not now, and now the work of revaluation in terms of our African past is taking place within the milieu of social upheaval, and the mechanics of upheaval have first priority on the energy of black people. African civilizations. Only after the above preliminary remarks is to possible to engage in discussions on African history as such. It is the purpose of this paper to suggest that emphasis on the highlights of ancient Africa civilization should be complemented by the examination of African culture and history in the same pre-European period. Scholars interested in African history have exhibited a preoccupation with a highly developed political state, which has led to a casual treatment of smaller states, or the so-called stateless societies, end quote. Where there is no political economic entity wider than the family. This means that the present written history of the content does not touch on the lives of millions of Africans who lived outside of states such as Egypt, Kush, Ethiopia, Ghana, Benin, etc. Even within those kingdoms, the historical accounts often concentrate narrowly on the behavior of elite groups and dynasties. We need to portray the elements of African everyday life and to comprehend the culture of all Africans, irrespective of whether they were resident of an empire of Mali or in an Ibo village. In constructing African civilization, the concern is to indicate that African social life had meaning and value, and that the African past is one with which the black man in the Americas can identify with pride. With the same criteria in mind, it is worth noting the following aspects of African social behavior: hospitality, the role of treatment, and of the aged, law and public order, and social tolerance. Numerous reports attest to the hospitality of African community, village, or chiefdom. The codes of hospitality and a spirit of charity prevented the extremes of poverty and abandonment which one finds in richer and supposedly more mature societies. The African extended family was in itself an agency of mutual aid and welfare, and the family connections led to the clan, where a similar pattern unfolds. The common ancestors shared by all clan members is very vague figure on the borders between history and legend. Many generations disdain, but a clan brother is a brother. He was welcomed, housed, and fed. If he turned up at the compound of another clan member whom he had never seen before, the greater the status of the individual, the greater his obligation to have an open house for all. Altogether, he did not get something in return, for the reciprocal exchange of gifts was a common practice. African approached their earliest European acquaintances in the same hospitable and charitable manner that was normal in dealing among themselves. They called the white man, quote, honored guest. They gave them protection and love. They piled them with gifts, and it took Africans some time to realize that European worshipped strange gods called money and profit. African societies did not prove immune to those gods, but right up to the present, one finds comments on the warmth of African hospitality emerging from the whole social conscious, and not just from unusually well-disposed members of the community. Because of the extended family system and the universal hospitality, the aged were fortunately free of the problems of subsistence. They played self-fulfilling and socially satisfying roles within their communities. While old age was a liability in the New World plantation and throughout the capitalist world, in Africa, advanced age brought honor, increased respect, and authority. I don't know this word. I'm going to try it. The gerontocratic. Let me go look this word up. Come on, highlight it. Like I asked you to. All right, be right back, everybody. Gerontocracy, which means a state, society, or group governed by old people. All right, gerontocracy. So the gerund gives it away. All right, who's in here? I don't understand why these people are in the gerontocratic basis of African society meant that a great deal of power and authority was based on seniority of an age. An elder was learned and wise because he had maximum exposure to life in that society, as well as all of the formal education which was available. As a young man, he had spent several months in the quote-unquote bush school, where he had received instructions prior to initiation. Later, he had graduated from successive age groups or through several levels of a fraternity, where secret knowledge was revealed at each stage. And finally, an elder would himself be a teacher. In a state system, elders tutored the prospective ruler and advised the ruling king, while in a stateless society, quote unquote, they were a sole repositories of historical, spiritual, and legal knowledge. In both sets of situations, they had to be informed and alert because of their responsibilities. In the greater empires of the Western Sudan, Berber and Arab visitors from North Africa never failed to be impressed by the security afforded to goods and persons, even when movement over long distances was involved. The movement of traders along the path of Akan country was equally safe, and these conditions exist in much more humble African societies. The Senegalese, the Dojola, long residents in lineage groups of the Casamance region were described as Pingo Park, as barbarous, quote unquote. But he found that he could leave his personal possessions among the DJOLA, the Dojola, for months on end without suffering any losses. This public order was maintained not by an extensive police force, but by the constraints of the community as a whole. Of course, crime did exist in the society, and it was dealt with by a complex code of customary laws, which in recent years have become the subject of scientific inquiry and scholarly treaties. The basic principles of justice was restitution, and the object of the legal judgment being being to help the wronged party rather than inflicting punishment on the offender. It is significant that one hears of nothing resembling a jail within indigenous African society, nor is there any evidence of stocks, fetters, and the like. European visitors to West Africa in the 15th and 16th centuries were struck by the mildness and humane nature of the laws. Capital punishment, for example, was rare, being completely absent in from some societies. The attitude of law suggests an attempt to put into practice the concepts of tolerance towards human frailty. Tolerance operated in a number of spheres, religion being the most important. Yoruba religion through Voodoo and Shango has had a strong impact on the life of Africans in the Caribbean. One scholar who has dabbled deeply into Yoruba religion has this to say. Here's what he says. I admire Yoruba paganism, first and foremost, for its tolerance. It is a religion which provides satisfaction for many different kinds of human temperaments. Everyone can worship the divine forces in his own fashion, and there is no rivalry or prejudice between different cults. But there is more than religious tolerance. There is human tolerance. Here they use the C word, cripples, disabled maybe, albinos, and other deformed persons have a special god to look after them. They occupy a special position at his shrine, and thus people who elsewhere are laughed at are here needed and respected. African traditional religions are by nature non-imperialistic. Unlike the universal revealed religions, they do not set out to show others lights, so that there is no possibility of domination in the sphere. African systems of dynamic beliefs allowed Islam to exist peacefully for centuries. They allowed the first Christians to enter without demur. And above all, the various African religions never waged the religious wars, which were so much a part of history in Europe. Even Christianity in Africa was represented by the Ethiopian Coptic Church, took on a different and more tolerant aspect. Western Christians mock the Ethiopian Coptic faith, largely because they despise its syncretism, and it's coming to terms with the divergent elements of culture within Ethiopia. We're going to look up this word, everybody. Right back. It was syncretism. Syncretism. Let's see here. Effects. And that means the amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religion, cultures, and schools of thought. The emergence of different inflectional varieties of the world. Okay, it's the first. So it's just consolidating, basically, I feel like. Not music. It's effects. Syncretism. Good word. Syncretism, and it... Oh, I already read that. All right. It is to be stressed that while some of the above considerations apply to African society today, there are to be cited in a much earlier historical context. They are noted by Europeans in the 15th century and were obviously in operations long before then. In other words, while the citizens of Songhai, Congo with a K, and Monotopa, Manitoba were creating the conditions for living in large territorial states. Other Africans were not steeped in darkness. That, after all, is a great myth, which we are still struggling to discard from the minds of our own brothers and sisters here in the Americas. Their fear is that Africa, which they left, is one of a premortal S word. They visualize aspects, like black people, swinging from, oh my gosh, from tree to tree, and hear the licking of the cannibal chops. To dispel this myth, it is invariably necessary to begin by pointing out that Africa, too, had great buildings and great states similar to those which emerge in the history of those countries, where our white oppressors and designate oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to look up this word too. Denigrators. I think it's denigrators. Yeah, and denigrators reside, both to the complement of and to the transcend that type of instructions. We have also to base ourselves solidly within culture of Africa. It is possible to compare Western Sudan between the 5th and the 15th century with Europe in the Dark and Middle Ages, and the comparison of advantages to Africa on many points. But from there, it is possible to fall into the trap of believing that political states is the only meaningful form of social development, and to feel bemused as a black man because Europe pursued that form of full in succeeding centuries, while Africa did not. Quite apart from the fact that stagnation in the developing world, they used the third, was casually related to advance in Western Europe. The argument about civilization leads to a cul-de-sac. They have it all in Dutch. They have cul-de-sac. When we do not reject European culture, egocentricities. I'm gonna look up this word, everybody. Having a hard time with the word today. Yay! Egocentricity. That's not it. Hold on, everybody. I'm doing my best. The quality of being egocentric or self-centered. Okay, nice. All right. Egocentricity. In this instance, the whites have merely selected a facet of their own culture, which is outstanding, namely the ability to bring together billions in a single political unit. And they have then used this as a universal yardstick for measuring the inherent worth of cultures and races. The classic example of this cultural egocentricity is the statement that, quote, the black man never invented the wheel, end quote. What is most fundamental is the attempt to evaluate the African contributions to the solution of the problems posed by man's existence in society, and hence the stress placed in this paper, on matters pertaining to social relations, codes of hospitality, possesses of the law, public order, and social and religious tolerance. In each of those areas, the human social activity, African norms and practices were given a high value by Europeans themselves. They often reflect that the hospitality they saw in the African village was lacking in their communities, that the security of goods and persons in Africa stood in marked contrast to brigadage or depredations in Europe, and that the restraint of African law with respect to capital punishment was to be set off against the fact that dozens of offenses were still punishable by death in Western Europe up to the 16th century. On the other hand, African norms were frustrating to the capitalists. For instance, the whites resented the polite formality of African greetings, since they were lengthy and could delay business for a whole day. One European denounced African hospitality in the following terms, and here's what he said, probably the most egregious bullshit too. Here we go. The law of hospitality is obstructive of industry. Is an obstructive of industry. If there is provisions in the country, a man who wants it has only to find out who has got any, and he must have his share. If he enters in any man's house during this repast and gives him the usual salutations, the man must invite him to partake. Thus, whatever abundance a man may get from assiduity. Oh my gosh, there's another word, everybody. The words are just flying in for me. Assiduity. No idea what that means, but I got it. Assiduity. These words are fun. Contrast or close attention to what one's doing. Okay. Assiduity. That's another word. Thank you. Will be shared by the lazy, which is not thing, and thus they seldom calculate for more than necessaries. But the laws of hospitality are not restrained to diet. A common man cannot quietly enjoy a spare shirt or a pair of trousers. Those who are too lazy to plant or hunt are also too lazy to trade. The above is a beautiful set piece of moral terminology of capitalist accumulation. The arduous and the industrious who will inherit the earth, while those who do not share grace are the ones who are quote-unquote lazy. It poignantly illustrates the difference between the African and the European cultures. A lot is known about the dialectical development of European society, but very little about that of Africa prior to the immediately after it was drawn into trade relations with Europe and the Americas. However, a few studies which exist suggest that the two continents were fundamentally different in ethos and were not moving in the same direction. Even within the empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, the explosiveness of class contradictions was lacking, as Dope stressed in his Nations Negres, I don't know, et culture. I think that okay, that's got to be a different language for the bad word. Sorry, everybody. In the state of Ashanti and Dahomey, whose growth was contemporaneous with the European mercantilism, there was no concept of the market, quote unquote, in the sense of supply and demand. The social redistribution of goods made accumulation impossible. The most pronounced line of growth was not economic, but culture. There were a few nuclei representing distinctive ways of organizing life, and this and these were spreading. The Mandi, Akin, Yoruba, and Hausa being among the best known from West Africa. European commerce and the slave trade in particular deflected the course of their historical advances. The difference between Africa and European historical formations made the white man quote unquote superior in the operative sense, for they were able to establish hegemony due to technology and class dynamic of capitalism. The consequences for Africa were disastrous. Economies were disjointed and oriented externally. Anarchy, justice in the realm of the law, internal slavery, and exploitation replaced public security and human operations of the law and the solidarity of the family. But apart from the immeasurable negative effects, one must also consider that the frantic amount of physical and social energy went into the defensive task of sheer survival. We did survive, not only in Africa, but on this side of the Atlantic, the greatest miracle of all time. And every day, black people in the Americas perform the miracle anew. Needless to say, we do more than just survive. Anguished New World black people in the search for dignity usually ask for elements of unquestioned grandeur in their African past. These can be perceived in the Benign sculptures and the pilgrims of Manasa Musa, and the carving rock churches of, oh my gosh, here we go, Laila Bella, and in a great deal more. But after all that, we would still lack the understanding of that ordinary African life had meaning and value. That is one of the weakest aspects of our perception of the African past, and it is that chink which allows the white propaganda machine to suggest that contemporary distortions of African society represents pure atavism. Let me look up this word, everybody. They're killing me with the words today. Yeah, I can't say. I can't say it. I tried. Atavism. That was atavism. Which is a tendency to revert to something ancient or ancestral. Alright. Okay, and African society represents pure atavism. Congolese and the Nigerian problems in particular have been successfully projected among black people as the breakout of the ancestral S-words or of tribalism. Ew. Once the restraining hand of white civilization was removed. Of course, in reality, these tragic contemporary situations are consequences of neo-colonial forces impinging on African colonial society, just as colonialism in its mercantilist and imperialist phases had earlier deformed traditional Africa. The foregoing remarks should be sufficient to substantiate the proposition that an overall view of ancient African civilization and ancient African culture is required to expunge the myths about African past, which linger in the minds of black people everywhere. This is the main revolutionary function of African history in our hemisphere. Some individuals investige that this knowledge is a stepping stone to the active regeneration of an Africa and an African way of life. But this is far-fetched, except in the case in the African continent itself. For instance, President Nyerere, in his policy document, Socialism and Rural Development, defined a new socialist agrarian formation, the Ujamaa village. After reflecting in the nature of African traditional societies, and the direction in which it is already being transformed within the colonial era and the first years of independence, then exercised by the leadership of the people of Tanzania as a regional rather than broadly African, and it was as much an exploration of the present as a recovery of the past applied to new world black people. This means in effect that history's nearest to revolutionary action will be the history of Africans in their new American environments. It's chapter 6, the grounding with my brothers. And anything that I say we is not me. I'm white. This is all black people. Every single bit of it. The government of Jamaica, which Garvey's homeland, has seen it fit to ban me and a Guyanese and black man and an African. But this is not very surprising, because though the composition of that government, of its prime minister, the head of state, and several leading personalities, though that composition happens to be a predominantly black, as the brothers at home say, they are all white-hearted. These men serve the interests of foreign white capitalist systems, and at home they uphold the social structures which ensure that the black man resides at the bottom of the social ladder. He is economically oppressed, and culturally he has no opportunity to express himself. That is the situation from which we move. There has recently, just tonight in fact, come to my attention a statement which is entitled, quote, "Text of Statement," end quote, by the Honorable H.L. Shearer, Prime Minister of Jamaica, made in the House of Representatives on 17th October regarding the exclusion of Dr. Walter Rodney. I up to now have not got a reasons for the ban imposed on me, and probably I shall make some reference to this document as I go along. But first, let me indicate this, that the government of Jamaica, in so far as it has attempted to stifle the aspirations of the masses, and in so far as it believed that my removal from the scene is going to aid in stifling the masses, it is making a serious mistake. This act in itself will not delay their day of judgment. Indeed, these fellows now know this. They know the present state of affairs. It cannot go on forever. And this is what creates the atmosphere of fear. This is what allows them to take such unintelligent and pain-stricken measures, first and foremost for the benefit of some West Indians who still refuse to appreciate that our society is racist. I would like to give a slight historical analysis of the problem. West Indian society is invariably a laboratory of racialism. We virtually invented racialism because it was in the slave system, on the slave plantation, that the fantastic gap between master and slave was translated into a feeling on the part of the white slave master that he had inherently to be superior to that black man who was slaving out in the fields. It was the white plantation owners who produced a number of pseudo-scientific and theological theories attesting to the inferiority of the black man. Ours was a society in which modern racialism was engendered. And it was the development and intensified sense then, assuming certain subtle but nevertheless vicious forms based on color and based on a hierarchy which presupposes that black is the lowest natural color of things and that white is at the top. That is the society from which we come, and the particular society has added a new dimension to the bag of tricks which racialists have. That dimension is to try to confuse the people. It goes like this. They claim that in our society we cannot talk about black and white because we have these gradations of shades. We have many peoples. We are told 95% of Jamaican population is clearly black. Another 5% is divided into these shades. And we are told we have many peoples. It is the harmonious, multiracial society, we are told. It is an integrated society, we are told. It reminds me of Ted Jones' poem, quote, integrated, the N-word with the ER, quote unquote. In this, it is a myth of the ruling class, and it is a subtle myth, an important myth, because it does, in fact, have a certain appeal. It talks about multiracial and harmonious living, which nobody on a theoretical level would oppose. This is what we are struggling for. The lie is that harmony exists. The lie is that harmony exists, and that Boilies month, that great black Jamaican patriot who marched, and as he marched, he said, quote, remember our color and cleave to the black, end quote. Marcus Garvey was also in the same category. Garvey's appeals was to all black men, whether they were Jamaican or outside, and even when there were not great leaders present, the mass of the people have constantly been acting against this system. In our epic of Rastafari, have presented the leading force of this expression of black consciousness. They have rejected this Philistine white West Indian society. They have sought their culture and spiritual roots in Ethiopia and Africa, so that rather there is a big flare-up or not, there is always a constant activity of black people who perceive that the system has nothing in it for them except suppression and oppression. Now the government is terribly afraid of the question of color. This is something I've learned from living in Jamaica for a period of time. They would much rather you talk about communism so that they can tell country people, quote, he is a communist. He wants to take your goats and your chickens, end quote. And do those Jamaican peasants want you to take their goats? No, man. And they are very right to so what government man are afraid of is the question of color. They are afraid of that tremendous historical experience of the degradation of the black man being brought to the fore. They do not want anybody to challenge their myth about, quote, out of many, one people, end quote, and the harmonious multiracial society. And they show it in various ways. They will ban people from coming to the country like James Foreman, Stokely Carmichael. They will ban the literature of Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Stokely Carmichael. The black Jamaican government, in case you do not know it, have banned all publications by Stokely Carmichael, publications by Elijah Muhammad, all publications by Malcolm X. I hope Stokely does not go and write a book on cookery or some such thing. It would be banned in Jamaica. In my case, to give you a small example, I went to Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation. I pre-recorded a program of black power, and white power systems said that they are not using that program when they saw what came out of it. A small example, but a token of things to come. no doubt. Because the system does not want you to open the issues. They do not want anybody to articulate those grievances, which the masses are talking about all the time. Now, what is my position? What is the position of all of us? Because we fall in the category of the Black West Indian intellectual, a privilege in our own society. What do we do with that privilege? The traditional patterns is that we join the establishment. The black educated man in the West Indies is as much a part of the system of oppression as the bank manager and the plantation soul. End quote. That is the condition upon which you exist as a so-called intellectual in society. How do we break out from this Babylonian captivity? I suggest 3 ways. I suggest first that the intellectuals, the academic, within his own discipline, has to attack those distortions which white imperialism, white culture imperialism, have produced in all branches of scholarship. In fact, what I was attempting to do, and this is Walter Rodney, in the Congress of Black Writers earlier, was to talk about that sort of thing and its relationship to African history. Of course, the white press of Canada did not see fit to talk about those points. I think I saw it only in the McGill Daily. They were more concerned with nice little juicy bits about violence. We will give them some tidbits as we go along. My second point is that the black intellectual has to move beyond his own discipline to challenge the social myths which exist in the society as a whole. In other words, this myth about the multiracial society. This is the sort of thing which we have a duty to perform to the black people from whom we came. Thirdly, the black intellectual, the black academic, must attach himself to the activity of the black masses. I shall not deal with point 1 on this occasion. I shall concentrate on points 2 and 3. I shall try to exemplify my own role in the period while I was there in Jamaica. I began by stating, first and foremost, that the struggle was there long before I went and will continue long after I have left. I am simply trying to analyze that particular conjunction of the forces was as I saw them when I attempted to get in touch with the black people to perform these 2 functions, attacking the myth of various myths rather than getting in touch, working with the people. On the first level, as far as black power was concerned, the response of the population was automatic because this is what they are doing. This is what they are talking about. They can tell you and I about black power. But I'll indicate this later on. You can learn from them what black power really means. You do not have to teach them anything. You just have to say it, and they add something to what you are saying. So the masses response was there, and the government response was also clearly there. They, in their panic, were quick to come out against these new specters. Black power. For my own part, I was prepared to make these statements in public. Around me, there gathered a nucleus, and a movement was born calling itself the Black Power Movement. Unfortunately, I have not brought the aims along with me, but you will find them highly respectable, even in the terms of the system. We went outside the universities. We talked to black brothers and black sisters, and this the society, the system could not tolerate. Even more, let us talk about the activities. I lectured at the university outside of the classroom, that is. I had public lectures. I talked about Black Power. And then I left there. I went from the campus. I was prepared to go anywhere that any group of black people were prepared to sit down and talk and listen, because that is Black Power. That is one of the elements. As sitting down together to reason, to quote unquote ground, as the brothers say. We have to quote ground together. There was all this FUROR about whites being present in the black rights, in the black writers. Congress, which most whites did not understand. They did not understand that our historical experience have been speaking to black people, white people, sorry. Rather it be begging white people, justifying ourselves against white people, or even verifying white people. Our whole context has been, quote, that is the man to talk to, end quote. Now, the new understanding is that black brothers must talk to each other. That is a very simple understanding which any responsible person outside a particular, quote, in-group, end quote, would understand. This is why we talk about our, quote unquote, family discussions. Now, when I went out, as I said, I would go to the radio if they wanted me. I would speak on televisions if they allowed me. I spoke at the Extramural Center. Now these are all highly respectable, and I would go further down into West Kingston. I would speak everywhere, wherever there was a possibility of our getting together. I might be in the sports club. It might be in a schoolroom. It might be in a church. It might be in a gully. Those of you who come from Jamaica know those gullies, corners. Got a puzzle piece. Yay, I did the puzzle piece. I passed the test. They are dark, dismal places with a black population who have had to seek refuge there. You will have to go there if you want to talk to them. I have spoken in what people called dungles, rubbish dumps, for that is where people live in Jamaica. People live in rubbish dumps. That is where the government puts people to live. Indeed, the government does not even want them to live in rubbish dumps. I do not know where they want them to go because they bulldoze them off and rubbish dumps and send them God knows where. I haven't sat on a little oil drum, rusty and in the midst of garbage of some black brothers, and I have grounded together. Now, obviously, this, first of all, must have puzzled the Jamaican government. I must be mad, surely. A man, we are giving a job. We are giving status. What is he doing with these guys? Shearers call them all matters of names. They're in this paper, you know. Sorry, everybody. Quote, the criminals and the hooligans. What is he doing with them? This is all the questions the government's asking them. Hold on a second. Oh, it's still the same people. Hold on a second, I just lost my bed. So they are puzzled, and then obviously after that suspicion, he must be up to something, as the paper will try to imply. But we spoke about a lot of things, and it was just the talking that was important, the meeting of black people. I was trying to contribute something. I was trying to contribute many experience in traveling, in reading, my analysis, and I was also gaining. As I will indicate. Now, for the government of Jamaica and this statement, I cannot go into it. I have a lot of ambiguous reactions to it. At one level, I want to tear it apart, but there are reasons why I do not want to tear it apart. The first is that all the charges made here are either irrelevant, frivolous, or vague, and I cannot put forward any defense against such. You know, it is like that trick could not put forward by defense against such. You know, it is like that trick question. A man comes up and asks you, have you stopped beating your wife? He makes the assumption that you are beating your wife and asks you, have you stopped? So it is that sort of nonsense. They throw out a little thing and then get you to grab the bait. And there is another reason why I would not defend myself against this. People like this man here, the so-called, the dishonorable H.L. Shearer, Prime Minister of Jamaica, this traitor to the black race, has no moral authority to lay accusations against me. What I will give instead is not a defense. It is an explanation. It is an attempt to make an analysis of what was going on in the hope that this has some meaning for other people who are either within the struggle today or would like to join the struggle. For the educated black man, as I said, the principles are clear. There are three possibilities open to him, and it seems to me that if he does not follow every single one of those three, and perhaps some more that he can think of, he is not fulfilling any function as far as our people are concerned, except the function of oppressing them. Let me refer to another statement which I made, which the white press found very irritating. That all white people are enemies until proven otherwise. And this applies to black intellectuals. All of us are enemies until enemies to the people until we prove otherwise. It is not just a question of student riots. The students have demonstrated, which is good. They came out. They heard a university lecturer was banned. They got no reason, which is the normal procedures of the Jamaican government. It does not give reasons for things. They came out. They started to talk along the road. The police started to tear gas them. They started to beat them with batons, a nightstick, and something flared up. Relatively small, but it was a great advance. I tell you, there is no more bourgeois camps in the world than the universities of West Indies. Universities of West Indies. Yes, I was there. In my time, this would not have happened. They might have demonstrated about bad food in the halls or in solidarity with South Africans who know on quite harmless issues as far as the Jamaican government was concerned. However, they moved, and that in itself is a good thing. But there was more of it than that. The Black Brothers of Kingston, Jamaica, moved against the government of Jamaica. That is the point that must come home. Let us stop calling it, quote, student riots. What has happened in Jamaica is that black people of the city of Kingston have seized upon the opportunity to begin their indictment against the government of Jamaica. Now let us see what happened. As far as I can gather, 50 buses were overturned and burnt. 14 major fires were started in different parts of the city. Certain known enemies of the people were spat upon, dragged out of their cars, and beaten. Shop windows were wrecked. I gathered that downtown Kingston looks like a hurricane, like Hurricane Flora, has just passed through. Now, let us get this abundantly clear. This did not happen in an isolated incident. That is part of the whole social malice. That is revolutionary activity. It has only marginal significance as far as my ban is concerned. The significance is that the brothers see that I am a spokesman of their cause, and the Jamaican government is so brazen as to stop me from returning. That is the incident that triggered it off. But beneath that, there is a whole range of short-term and long-term considerations which we must take in mind. Take, for instance, the fact that those 50 buses were burned. that is not just coincidental. For those who know Jamaican society, the JOF company running transport in Kingston is one of the most notorious companies in Jamaica. There is a strike there every other day. It is notorious it is notorious from the point of view of its relationship with the workers. And just recently it decided to hike the fares as far as the people were concerned. Now imagine the poor people of Jamaica standing in the hot sun, waiting on the bus, having to pay to. Here is a whole set of guys flashing by some cars longer than you can see out here in Montreal. You have to go to Jamaica to see long cars, you know? The little middle class there, they love to show off. The bigger cars, the better. A little petty city, and they fill it up with American cars, and they jump around and they feel so pleased with themselves. And the black man is there, and he has not got $4 Jamaican for a bus fare. So when these 50 buses were burnt, it was that type of issue that was involved. The brothers who were in that struggle unemployed. They have no housing. They have no education. They have no prospects in the society, save to go to what the brothers called, quote, May Pen burial cemetery. They call it must pen. You must go there. That is what has been going on in the society. So if we have to take a stand, we have to take a stand perhaps on the first issue, saying the immoral, shameless conduct of the Jamaican government in issuing is banned. But it is not the first, and presumably will not be the last such action on their part. We also have to take a stand of solidarity behind those black brothers. We also have to recognize that 3 more martyrs have been added to a long list of black martyrs in Jamaica in recent days. We will have to find out their names. We will have to sing their praises. This is not an issue which is isolated. In fact, as I speak here, I would like to feel perhaps that what I am saying is one form of or another will reach the brothers, and therefore it is a message both to you and to them. And above all, I would like to indicate my own gratification for the experience which I shared with them, because I got knowledge from them, real knowledge. We have to speak to Jamaican Rasta, and you have to listen to him. Listen very carefully, and then you will hear him tell you about the word. And when you listen to him and you go back and read Mantu, M-U-N-2-T-U, an academic text, and read about Namo, N-O-M-O, an African concept for word, and you say goodness. The Rastas know this. They knew this before. Oh my gosh, I don't know how. Janhoenzi Jean. You have to listen to them, and you hear them talk about cosmic power, and it rings a bell. I say, but I have read this somewhere. This is Africa. You have to listen to their drums to get the message of the cosmic power. And when you get that, and when you get that, you will get humility, because look who you are learning from. The system says they have nothing. They are the illiterates. They are the people of Jamaica. They use the D word, the dark. They use dark. Our conception of the whole world is that white is good and black is bad. So when you are talking about the man is dark, you mean he is not intelligent. He has a dark mind. So that is what the system says. But you learn humility after you get into contact with these brothers. And it is really great. I'm giving here now a personal reaction. I find my colleagues, my so-called peers, white people, black bourgeoisie, all frustrate me, and I get annoyed. I find it difficult to conduct a discussion. I am more likely than not to tell them a few bad words after a while, and by and large, I do not think it is good for the personality. Probably makes you contemptuous, haughty, and so on, that you have seen and they have not seen. But with the black brothers, you learn humility because they are teaching you, and you get confidence too. You get a confidence that comes from an unawareness that our people are beautiful. Beautiful is the very existence of black people. Now we have gone through the historical experience, through which by all accounts we should have been wiped out. We have been subjected to genocidal practices, millions raped from the West African continent, and systems of slavery in the West Indies, which is designed to kill people. The documents are there. White slave masters used to conduct a discussion. They said, look, we have some black people. What do we do with them? Is it better to let them grow old and work for us, or to extend period of time, or should we let him work for a specific period of time, work him so hard and let him die, and by a fresh enslaved person? And the consensus of opinion was this: take a prime African black person, work him to death for 5 years, and you make a profit. So the system aimed at killing us out. Now, not only have we survived as people, but the Black Brothers and Kingston, Jamaica in particular, these are brothers who, up to now, are every day performing a miracle. It is a miracle how those fellows live. They live and they are physically fit. They have a vitality, validity of mind. I gotta make sure this word, everybody. I'm so sorry. Right. It's vitality. I was right. Vitality of mind. They have a tremendous sense of humor. They have depth. How do they do that? In the midst of the existing conditions. They create. They are always saying things. You know that some of the best painters and writers are coming out of the Rastafarian environment. The black people in the West Indies have produced all the culture that we have, whether it be steel band or folk music. Black bourgeoisie and white people in the West Indies have produced nothing. Black people who have suffered all these years create. That is amazing. So these are the things you learn when you are in contact with our people. And therefore, it seems to me that there is something that we have to give. I tried to outline some of these things, which I tried to give. Commentaries. Living the grounding of personal context. Patricia Rodney. I think this is Walter Rodney's wife. So we're going to read about what they say. Let's see here. Let's just checking something out here real quick. All right. And, okay, we'll have conscious youth. Okay. So see, all right, so we're going to read a little bit. I think this is Walter Rodney's wife. Let's find out. But he's basically saying that even as intellectuals, even as him, he always sees himself with inside. This is what we call as Maoist mass lying theory, where we go down to and we learn from the people. We learn about their struggles, their contradictions, what their material conditions are. We learn everything from them. We learn what their histories are. We learn what's going on, and then we converse with them, and we educate each other, you know. So like he's telling all the black intellectuals and all this to give up those things and to move down and actually listen to the black masses of the people that are being subjugated. So here, living the groundings of personal context, Patricia Rodney. Grounding is a practice, a way of living. It is not just a word. It is how Walter lived his life. His personal growth, education, and social engagement from childhood shaped his discourse with African and Caribbean peoples who were socially, economically, and politically disenfranchised, regardless of their heritage. These experiences culminated in the publications of Grounding with My Brothers in 1969. Walter Anthony Rodney was born on March 23rd, 1942 in Georgetown, British Guiana, and the second child of a family of 5 siblings, 4 brothers and 1 sister. Walter's parents, Edwards and Pauline Rodney, were primary influences in his formative years, introducing him to activism at an early age. He often accompanied his father, a tailor, and his mother, a seamstress, to local community activities, political meetings. Socio-political engagement was not uncommon among the Guyanese youth growing up in the 1950s, a time when a recently independent British Guiana was elected the first socialist government in the Western Hemisphere. Walter and I, along with our peers, were strongly influenced by the political climate and the infectious spirit for independence that called for the moved Guyanese of all the generations to action. As members of the debate team in Queen's College, Walter further developed his interest in social activism and his ability to effectively communicate his ideas and thoughts. He was the president of a historical society, Lance Corporal in a cadet corps, and a high jump champion. In 1960s, he won an open art scholarship to the University of West Indies, UWI, in Mona, Jamaica. It was as a student in Jamaica that Walter was what first felt the disconnect between his life on campus and the grassroots population that surrounded the university. As a student, he enjoyed a well-rounded campus life, debating and participating in students and local politics, attending parties and dances, and excelling in his studies. He graduated with his first class honor degree in history in 1963. I met Walter while we were high school students. It was a casual encounter, and since he did not socialize in the same circles, we remained more acquaintances. We met again in December 1960s in the New Year's Eve party in Georgetown. This turned out to be a very meaningful encounter as it marked the beginning of our long-distance relationship. Walter returned to his studies in the UWI, Jamaica, and moved to London to study nursing. Over the next 3 years, we continued our relationship through correspondence, with Walter making a trip to London in the summer of 1962. Walter returned to London, this time on the academic scholarship, to pursue graduate studies in history at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, and conducting the research of his thesis, The History of Upper Guinea Coast, 1545 to 1800. Walter was faced with a dilemma of either relying on existing interpretations of original colonial documents housed in Spain, Portugal, and Italy, or otherwise learn 2 new languages. Already fluent in Spanish, he opted for the latter, developing a working knowledge of Portuguese and Italian in order to fully appreciate the nuances of languages and to gain a better understanding of slavery records. Walter spent several months in Portugal, Spain, and Italy, steeped in his research and writing. I visited him in Portugal, where I observed him at work researching volumes of colonial records in the archives of Lisbon. Our relationship continued and deepened. And on his return to London, we committed to spending our lives together. We got married on January 2nd, 1965. On July 5th, 1966, at the age of 24 years, Walter was granted his PhD. This was, however, the second most significant event of that day. 2 hours prior, he was at the hospital welcoming the arrival of his first child, our son, Shaka. Walter's passion to effect change matured while he was living in London. It was there that he argumented with analytical skills through the studies of Marxism with a group of Caribbean students who met weekly, usually on Friday night, at the home of C.L. James and Selma James. These sessions had lasted for hours as they debated the struggles of Caribbean and immigrant workers in London, in Africa, and at home in the Caribbean. Walter also became a well-known speaker at Hyde Park, sharpening his auditory skills and his ability to connect with diverse audiences. Equipped with his PhD, Walter accepted his first academic teaching appointment in 1966 at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. It was an opportunity to immerse himself in the culture of the continent he studied and those histories of resilience he respected. Walter also spent time monitoring secondary school students and other groups and conducting classes at the Adult Education Center. I was employed as a public health nurse with the Dar es Salaam City Council. Tanzania was our first family home, and it was a magnet for friends and colleagues from Tanzania and other African countries, North America and Europe, with whom we met for food, music, conversations, discussions about the social political changes in East Africa and throughout the region. In early 1967, Walter was offered an academic appointment and lecturer in the House of History at the University of the West Indies at Mona, Jamaica. It was a chance to move back to familiar territory and an opportunity to share with Caribbean students his knowledge of Africa, African history, and his experience. With Walter as a guide, I learned firsthand of the extreme socioeconomic disparities of Jamaica. Like many other former colonies, class and skin color tone played a significant role in the distribution of wealth and resources. The phenomenon referred to by the late Professor Stuart Hall as meritocracy. We spent the weekend exploring the country and socializing with friends. Dominoes, cards, and bridge were some of his favorite leisure activities. We had a seemingly ideal life. At the same time that we were the products of the working class family. We were also enjoying academic privileges and social access afforded by his academic position. Walter, however, was torn by the lack of connection between academia and the working class. He had a strong desire to bridge these worlds. He was convinced not only that he could impart his knowledge and understanding of history, social structures, and political analysis to students and working class people, but he could foster a culture of grassroots change and empower people with tools of implement such change. Walter became well known for his unprompted history lessons and participations in debates around the campus and in the community. He was particularly drawn to and embraced by the Rastafarian community, who, through disenfranchised by the state apparatus, remained proud of their traditions and resourcefulness in their livelihood and production of labor. The Rastafarians were viewed as outcasts and feared because of their beliefs, appearances, and lifestyles, not only by the government but also by the middle class, the church communities, and even some of the working class. Walter's conversation with them and with similar oppressed or marginalized populations were based on their self-emancipation and founding of mutual respect and solidarity. One cannot measure the organic and intimately personal connections Walter had and felt with his brother, and as he immersed himself in historical context of their conditions. He was profoundly changed by their struggles and considered their survival a daily accomplishment. For him, it was a quote-unquote, question of action, determined, informed, and scientific action because imperialism and its cohorts, end quote. The belief that as a quote matter of integrity, end quote, he must challenge those inequalities as long as he remained in Jamaica. Walter included that any inactivity on his part would render him no better than those that create the perpetuate the system. So the commitment that Walter felt within the context of his groundings, he rooted in what he believed was a singular purpose, his obligation to effect change. Walter also believed that there would be a people's uprising in Jamaica, and at some point in time, as a direct response to the consequence of the injustice and unequal distribution of wealth. We could not have predicted, however, that he would be an impetus of one such uprising. Walter left our home in Kingston in October 1968 and attended the Congress of Black Writers in Montreal. I was pregnant with our second child and was at the time a first-year student of social science, while working part-time as a staff nurse at the IWI hospital. We were surprised when the Shearer government would use this opportunity to deny Walter's re-entry into the country. Apparently, the government had initiated this action after the university administration refused to terminate Walter's contract. Although pregnant, I didn't hesitate to join the student-organized demonstration in protest of the government's ban on Walter and of their declaration of him as a persona non grata. To prevent the students from marching into downtown Kingston, the police dispersed the crowds with tear gas and excessive force. The unrest continued for 2 weeks, spreading into communities, broadening to encompass general discontent about conditions in Jamaica, and ultimately resulted in riots in Kingston that forced extensive debates in the Jamaican Parliament. It was reported that several working class people were killed and numerous injured, while millions of dollars of property was destroyed. As the students returned to the university on 17th October, orders were given to put the Mona campus on lockdown. Non-university personnel were restricted access. This included medical personnel from the university hospital, thus limiting their ability to provide assistance to those in need. The combination of tear gas, dehydration, and exhaustion from marching brought the premature contradictions, and I was immediately placed on bed rest and observation. Since the local situation remained volatile, Shaka and I moved in with our neighbors and stayed there until we finally left Jamaica at the end of October 1968. Shaka and I reunited with Walter in London. We were looking forward to traveling with him to Cuba, where we could reflect and write about his experience in Jamaica. However, the process to obtain visa was for Shaka, and I took longer than anticipated. And Walter eventually traveled to Havana alone, where he spent many months writing and learning about the experience of the Cuban people. As my pregnancy progressed, we decided that Shaka and I would travel ahead to Tanzania, where he would join us shortly after. The two of us arrived in Tanzania in early December 1968. I gave birth to our second child, Kanaya, on March 1969. During that time, we stayed with friends, while Walter joined us in June of that year. Kanainai, whom Walter would see for the first time, was already 3 months old. Aww. The Groundings With My Brothers is a compilation of speeches on African history that Walter gave on and off campus over the 9-month period we lived in Jamaica. On the journey back to Tanzania, Walter left a number of these speeches with friends in London. The publication of and sale of the book in 1969 contributed to the establishment of Boya Lel Overture publication, an independent black publishing house in London. On his return to academia, Walter was appointed a senior lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam and focused on teaching, research, and other administrative responsibilities in the Department of History. In addition to his work on campus, Walter contributed significantly to Kashi, the magazine of the university students' African Revolutionary Front, conducting literatures in the USARF self-education classes, worked in cooperative villages and student-run farms, attended symposiums, demonstrations, and expeditions about the Vietnam War, Portuguese colonial rule in apartheid South Africa, and supported the efforts of African liberation movements. Walter also continued his research and penned his seminal and now classic work, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and devoted father, husband, and friend. Walter was at the same time fully immersed in academic discourse and theoretical examinations, and entrenched in local politics and activist struggles. On March 1971, our second daughter, Ashia, was born. Although we loved living in Tanzania, and unprecedented political changes occurred in the country were of concern to the left and other progressive comrades on campus. Walter felt that it was time to return to the Caribbean, where he could more improve the lives of the poor and working class. We also felt the need to be closer to family members, especially our parents, who were getting older, and to raise our children in the Caribbean culture. In 1974, Walter was offered and accepted an academic appointment at the University of Guyana. I left Tanzania in May 1974 for Guyana with our three children, Shaka, Kanania, I can't say it, and Asha, while Walter remained in Dar to attend the Sixth Pan African Congress. However, some reactionary governments influenced the host country to permit only government delegates to attend, thus denying Walter the opportunity to participate. Prior to his return to Guyana, Walter spent about 6 weeks as a co-director of the Summer Research Symposium at the Institution of Black World, IBW, in Atlanta, Georgia. This was his second visit to the institution, and being first in June 1971 upon his return to Guyana in September 1974, Walter was informed that the academic appointment he was offered had been revoked by the government, of course. In 1979, on the returning to Guyana, after completing my undergraduate degree at UWI Jamaica, I too became unemployed after I reapplied for my previous position and was informed that I was now unqualified. In a matter of hours, several other jobs offers were also rescinded. That's wild. The final question posed to me during an interview for the position at the University of Guyana was about my husband's political activities. My response to the interviewer was that he was interviewing me and not my husband. I was told that if I did not answer the question, that the interview was over. I thanked the panel and left. I was later informed that my file was flagged. I was never to be considered for any university position. On May 1980, a colleague and a friend, then of development studies, hired me as a research assistant for Phase 11 of the Caribbean Technology Policy Studies project. This was only possible because the grant funding that paid my salary was from the international agency. Because Walter was unemployed in Guyana, to support his family, he had no alternative but to seek paid teaching appointments and speaking engagements abroad in the United States and Europe. Although he was offered numerous academic positions overseas, he was committed to remaining in Guyana. During this period, he conducted research, presented papers at conferences, and wrote academic articles for publication. He was served as a guest lecturer at various social science courses, as associate editor of Transition, the faculty journal, and as history consultant to the University of Guyana. He completed several books, including Guyanese sugar plantations in the late 19th century, 1979, and two children's books. His path-breaking work, The History of the Guyanans Working People, 1881 to 1905, and the two children's book, Coffee on Bodi, Out of Africa, and here we go, La Kashmir, Out of India, would all be published posthumously aged in politics locally, and continued to his groundings with bauxite and sugar workers, speaking at bottom houses and wherever people would assemble. He conducted weekly educational classes at our home for friends and community members interested in learning about Africa, African history, and Marxism. Walter joined the Working People's Alliance, WPA, continued his activism and political engagement as one of its leaders until his assassination at the age of 38 on the February 13th, June 1980. For Walter's, groundings were not isolated events. Rather, groundings exemplified his approach to life, one where academics and activism were integrated and inseparable to the pursuit of equality, justice, and a common humanity. His connection to workers and poor people in the Caribbean, Africa, and throughout the world was authentic and organic. The book encapsulated the symbolic relationship in Jamaica, where Walter was learning from the sharing with Rastafarian brothers and sisters about their culture, traditions, and conditions. Walter often said that he learned more from Rastafarian community than he could ever teach them. That these conversations, which he so treasured, continue to inspire a new generation. His act is deeply felt, especially during special occasions and family gatherings. It is a void that seems too deep to fill. We miss his voice, assurance, and analytical mind as we seek solutions to family and contemporary societal issues. His absence is particularly tangible as we celebrate his life annually through the Walter Rodney Symposium, held during a week of his birth date. The greatest loss is that he was denied the opportunity to know his grandchildren, Aisha, Kai, Saki, and I can't say this other word, and Shui Anthony. They will never directly know this love, witty and playful man that his three children, Shaka, Kanaya, and Asha, knew and treasured. Our family continues to hold fast and to cherish our wonderful memories of this loving and generous man. He continues to give us inspiration and hope for a better world. The spirit of Walter Rodney's life lives on. And I'll stop there, and then we'll probably finish this up tomorrow, because we're gonna listen to other people and what they say about him too. How far is this? Well, whoa, there's more. There's still more and more to go. Yeah, we're probably going to be finishing this up soon. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow might be it. Jesus Christ, there's so many people writing about him. So that was his wife talking about him. And then we'll talk about... Okay, that's not it. This is this other person. All right, let's see here. Okay, so we're gonna listen to next will be The Conscious Youth, Robin Bongo, Jerry Smalls. They're gonna talk about their engagement with Walter Rodney, and then there's gonna be another person. So we stopped on page 92. All right, we stopped on page 92. Yeah, Walter Rodney's pretty good. Walter Rodney's brilliant. All right, does anybody have any questions of what we read or want to talk about anything? I'm open and ready to go. Yep. I'll give it a couple minutes. If not, we'll just move on. Do. Yeah, Walter Rodney is a must-read. Based individual. You know? So, yeah. All right then, well, if no one wants to come up, I'll go ahead and close it out. We'll finish it up maybe tomorrow, and then we'll move on to indigenous readings. I read the ending. I'm reading towards the end of this book that we're reading, Grounding with My Brothers. We talked about how Walter Rodney was the kind of person that actually was trying to teach and learn at the same time. He didn't stay in his academic status. He actually went down to the people and actually learned from them. And he said how important it is that African history be taught to African people, that it's important for them to realize the development of Africa before the engagement of like colonialism, and how wonderful and how rich their culture was before the contact with colonialism and stuff. Yeah. No, it's not long. It's about 100 and something pages long. Yeah. Exactly. There's supposed to be another book by another author called Grounding with My Sisters. And I think it's a small essay. It's not a long book like this. I think it's just an essay, you know, of Grounding with My Sisters. But yeah, Walter Rodney talks about the significance of how like white imperialism and he talks about white cultural imperialism and how they strip and take away African culture and history to make it look like they lived in the darkness of their continent, and that white people came and brought light to their continent and civilization, and how that underdevelops the development of an African person to be subjugated to white racism. So yeah. So very good book. So, but anyways, does anybody? I'm gonna go ahead and close out and listen. Anybody has any other questions? I hope everybody has a good night. Thanks for the 5,000 likes, and thank you for everybody for sticking around. I appreciate you all. Have a good night. With the dog.